Hey, what's going on guys? My name is KarQ, and today with the Predator Training Room, we're going to dive into my specific Overwatch settings that I personally use on the Orion 9000 desktop that's powered by the Intel Core i7 processor. The first thing we're going to see is the display mode. Always play in full screen because this ensures your GPU driver is controlling and rendering the game alone, boosts your frames per second, and will lower input lag. Now, what is input lag? It's basically the delay between your input, such as a mouse click to shoot your weapon, and seeing it happen on your screen. I know playing in borderless windowed is convenient because it's easier to alt-tab to check your messages among other things. However, play in full screen if you want to optimize your experience. Now for the target display, this is just the display the game will be run on. This is only relevant for those who have multiple monitors, just leave it at best match. For the resolution, I use 1920 by 1080 and the 200 here represents the refresh rate of my monitor. Quick tip, if you've ever purchased a monitor that is not a 60Hz, such as 144Hz or 200Hz in my case, ensure you're actually using the correct refresh rate for your game. I do believe that Overwatch may still default to 60 if you've just upgraded, since it probably saved your settings from your previous monitor, so open that drop down menu and select accordingly. I am currently using a Predator Z301C monitor, which is a 2560 by 1080 resolution, or a 21:9 aspect ratio if you would, since it's a curved ultra-wide. I love the long display when I edit and play single player games, but I dislike it for competitive FPS games like Overwatch. Most people do play on a 16:9 ratio or a 1920 by 1080 because that's still the tournament standard and what organizations will use for events, so it's just in my best interest to continually play on a resolution that's easily transferable. So yes, that means I play with black bars. Now for the FOV, that stands for field of view, I recommend keeping it at the maximum, which is 103. Having your FOV at 80, which is the minimum on this slider, limits your peripheral vision, and keeping it on the maximum will allow you to see that, sneaky tracer on the outmost edge of your screen. Now we already talked about aspect ratio, again I use 16:9, and next up is VSync and triple buffering, which I recommend keeping off at all times to reduce input lag. Now for reduce buffering, okay, this is a bit weird. I'm no engineer, so don't quote me on this, but as far as I understand it, you should be keeping reduce buffering on to, well, I guess reduce or remove the buffering or the pre-rendered frame that Overwatch graphics holds onto before rendering the next frame in order to smooth out what you see. If you have a lower end PC and run the game on 60 FPS, you may keep the setting off to ensure your game looks smoother visually at the expense of input lag. However, if you play at a higher refresh rate such as 144Hz or higher and have a machine that can pump out hundreds of frames per second, I recommend turning this setting on to reduce that frame buffering to minimize input lag. Anecdotally, having this setting on does make my gameplay feel better since my shots feel like they're registering and connecting. Now I do want to note that there is an issue with the game where if you alt-tab the game, you may notice your FPS drops when you tab back in and has 3 dots on the bottom right of your FPS counter. If you toggle the reduce buffering off and on again, it puts it back at 1 dot and the FPS may be increased. I don't fully understand why this happens, but if you ever notice a frame drop in your game, consider toggling that reduce buffering off and on again as a temporary solution. If you watch a lot of Overwatch streamers, you may notice that almost all of them go into their options to turn this reduce buffering off and on again multiple times a stream for this specific reason. Under Advanced Performance Stats, you can display these all. This is just a personal preference on what you'd like to see on your screen, but for me, I just show my frame rate, GPU temperature, and network latency, which everyone calls ping. System clock is also just a display your clock on the top right, which is personal preference as well. Now, limit FPS is a bit up in the air since it's dependent on your machine. I customize my frame rate cap at 210 frames. Why? Well, despite having the Orion 9000 equipped with the GTX 1080 Ti and Intel i7 8700K, Overwatch is not perfectly optimized and my frames are volatile and have way too much deviation between 200 to 300 FPS depending on the map and large team fights. So unless your machine can stay at 300 FPS uncapped at all times during your games, I would recommend capping your frame rate around your monitor's refresh rate. Again, in my case, it's 200Hz, so I actually picked 210 as a little extra 10 frame buffer. Now, under the Advanced Graphics Quality tab, we know the NVIDIA GTX 1080 Ti and the Orion 9000 can run this game on Ultra and Epic no problem at the cost of a lower frame rate, but if you're looking to optimize for competitive performance, here are my recommended settings. Render scale, do not keep it on automatic, pick it manually. 100% is fine, but if you're having problems with your FPS dropping, 75% still looks decent in my opinion and can vastly reduce the amount of strain on your GPU. Texture quality should be low. Texture filtering can be a little higher since it doesn't impact your FPS much. I like it on high personally. Local fog detail I would keep on low, dynamic reflection off. And shadow detail I would recommend either low or medium, but not off. Having shadows can help you notice an enemy above you in case you don't hear them. Model detail should be low because anything higher, even medium, starts adding unnecessary clutter to the game that can prevent you from seeing certain angles. I noticed this once on Blizzard World where I was trying to shoot down a Pharah and she was perfectly hovering behind these stupid balloons that you can only see on medium or above detail, but can't see it on low. Like, you can still shoot through them on medium or high model detail, but it just blocks your view, so why hinder yourself? So keep it on low. Effects, keep it on low, lighting on low, and anti-aliasing off. But if you absolutely can't stand the jaggedy edges, you can turn on anti-aliasing to low or medium to smooth it out just a little bit. In my experience with Overwatch, this doesn't hurt the FPS that much, but you can experiment with this. Refraction quality, I keep it on low. Screenshot quality doesn't do anything to your in-game itself, so I just leave it as is. Local reflections off and ambient occlusion off. For gamma correction, contrast, and brightness, I leave it as is, and recently there have been new colorblind options available. You can change through the filters and move the strength of the filter slider up and down depending on which type of color blindness you suffer from. However, you also now get the option to customize the enemy UI and your friendly UI colors. I personally leave the enemies in the red default and change my friendly UI to neon blue instead of the default blue because it really accentuates the kill feed and helps me keep track of who's dying in the middle of hectic teamfights in the corner of my eye. Also, the score screen looks pretty cool, you can't really argue that. I know there are some other people out there who recommend changing the enemy UI to magenta or yellow to help the enemy stand out a bit more, but for me, as an Ana player, having it on magenta messes me up because it's hard to distinguish who's been hit by my anti-grenade, and conversely, yellow colored enemy HP bars mess me up because when I hit my bionade on a friendly teammate, their HP also turns yellow because they're buffed with healing. So, it's a bit confusing for me. I keep it on default since I'm not colorblind. That's all for this video segment. This has been part of the Predator Training Room. Visit their website along with their YouTube channel for more strategic gaming content. Of course, we also can't forget that this has been powered by the Predator Orion series and the Intel Core series. One more time, subscribe to the Predator Training Room today.